Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Blane Smith.
It's late December 1963. A month earlier, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. My mom and my sisters have the Christmas food smells wafting through the house. Me, Dad, and my older brothers are watching the Cleveland Browns and the Green Bay Packers on TV, our black and white TV, with the fuzzy picture. One player is having a tremendous game. Every time he runs with the ball, the crowd stands and cheers. It's interesting because we move and we cut with him as the would-be tacklers fall to the ground. He scores a touchdown. He walks to the sideline. He sits on the bench and takes his helmet off. Black and white TVs are not like the black and white flat screens if you've got one of the big jobs today. Everybody was a different shade of gray. And I didn't know until he took the helmet off. He had the curly, tight afro, and sweat was rolling down his face. And I was surprised and amazed because it was a black man. It could be me. You didn't see too many black people on TV back then. I asked my brothers, I said, who is that? And almost in a chorus, they said, that's Jim Brown, the greatest running back to ever play professional football. And being young and inquisitive, I said, how much money does he make? My older brother, C.W., said $25,000. I turned to my dad and asked a question at 9 years old I would have never asked. I said, how much money you make? Dad said $1,800 a year, boy. Confused and 9 years old, I walked to the kitchen. I said, I'm going to ask my older sister, Big Dot. She was smart. I said, Big Dot, what's the most money? $1,800 from Dad or Jim Brown's $25,000? Big Dot said $25,000 is more. And then Big Dot said something I've never forgotten until this day. She said, I know who Jim Brown is. And for Big Dot to know who Jim Brown was, she didn't watch a lot of sports. So I knew that was something. I walked back into the living room and I sit on the edge of the couch and I've got more questions. I said, how do I get to play in the NFL? My dad says, boy, you got to go to college. My older brother, C.W., he said, you got to be physically strong and in great shape and play outstanding football. I said, tomorrow I'm going to start doing push-ups and sit-ups. And I learned one thing from those conversations, that Jim Brown made a lot more than my dad. And Jim Brown was cheered and adored. At that moment, that became my dream and my lifelong journey. 1965, Malcolm X is assassinated in February. My fifth grade teacher, Mr. Cope, was having career day, and he had told all the students about growing up, becoming an adult, and what will we do. On career day, he wanted us to stand in front of each other at the podium and say what we wanted. My classmates would stand up and say, I want to be a doctor. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a lawyer. They had no story with what they were saying. I knew I had a lot more to say. But after each student spoke, we applauded and they sat down. Finally, it was my turn. I had written my stuff down a long time ago. I pulled my notebook out, stepped up to the podium, and I said, I'm going to Roosevelt High School. I'm going to play football and basketball at Roosevelt High School, and when I graduate, I'm going to be the best athlete to ever come out of the school. I said, when I'm a junior and a senior, I'm going to be voted Gary Post Tribune, All Northwest Conference. And I looked around. I said, my classmates was laughing at me. Just a little giggle at first. I wasn't finished. I said, I'm going to a major university, and I'm going to be all conference, and I'm going to be a Kodak All-American. And I'm going to play football. I'm going to get drafted in the NFL, play football, and I'm going to play for 10 years, and then I'm going to retire and go to the Hall of Fame. This time when I looked up, Mr. Cope was rolling and laughing on his desk. My classmates was laughing uncontrollably on the floor and on the desk. I looked at him and I said, they don't believe me. But they knew I wasn't much of an athlete then. But I said to myself, I'm going to have to prove myself. So it became another lifelong journey to become the person that I had said. 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles. The 1960s was a turbulent time in America. The civil rights movement was booming and on the news. The Vietnam War was on the news every night. Black folks no longer wanted to be called Negroes. I was growing and the nation was growing. A year later, it's my freshman year to play football. I go to bed and I'm thinking of my first football practice. I fall asleep and I'm dreaming. And I hear our exercise cadence, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm dreaming, and then I snap into consciousness. I'm late for Pulaski's first football practice. I jump up, I throw my clothes on, I run to practice. I see the head coach, Coach Waterhouse. He said, Blane, get your butt dressed. You're late. Coach Waterhouse knew I wanted to play football since the 7th grade. I ran down into the locker room. I put my gear on. I run out to practice. I stand in the back because 1, I'm late, and 2, I'm embarrassed and I don't want to bring any attention to myself. Coach Dennis was teaching the boys how to hit a dummy properly. He sees me standing in the back. Coach Dennis knows my older brothers, and he says, Blane Smith, come up here. I go up there. He says, I want you in a 3-point stance, and I want you to fire off the ball when I blow this whistle. Knock the hell out of that dummy and do it like a Smith should. He said, ready, set. I set on command. The next thing I know, I feel Coach Dennis' foot kick me square in my ass. I hear the whistle, and from the force of the kick, I fall to the ground, and when I hit the ground, Coach Dennis said, Blane Smith, get your ass to the back of the line. He said, you've got to earn your right on this team, and don't ever be late again. I gathered myself, and for the next 2 weeks, I did make the starting offensive and defensive unit at tackle. I played very well. In that spring, Coach Henderson and 2 big guys came from Roosevelt High School recruiting us. And they talked about Roosevelt's glory days, and they talked about all the traditions. And the coach and the players said, if you want to make the team, you've got to work out this summer and be prepared for 2-a-days. I was feeling my Blane Smith self. I got up out of the audience and started walking to the stage. And I said, I'm Blane Smith. I'm coming to Roosevelt next year, and I'm going to take the starting defensive end and tight end job on the varsity. Coach Henderson was a mild-mannered black gentleman. He said, son, that's an awfully big boast for you to come to Roosevelt and take that job. And I looked at all of them in the eye from down there, looking up. I said, I will see you all in August for 2-a-days. So the summer comes, I'm running 2 miles a day. I'm running 20 100-yard wind sprints. I'm doing my football drills. I'm doing push-ups. I'm doing sit-ups. Finally, August 15th comes. It's football time. We show up to pick up our equipment. I see the senior who's starting at defensive end, Gabriel Fears. I knew who he was. He did not know me. I decided to introduce myself. He reached for a helmet. I snatched the helmet out of his hand, and I told him, "Get behind me, because that's where you'll be. Get used to it." I was thinking that I'd get elbowed in the back, hit in the head, something. But at that moment, he did nothing, and I knew I had taken his heart. Two-a-days are the roughest practices a player will ever go through. Coach demands the utmost out of you, 110% on every play, every drill. But there is one drill in football that separates the players from the pretenders, and it's called the nutcracker. Coach lays two dummies parallel on the field. And I guess Coach Henderson had told the coaches what I had said at the Pulaski Auditorium. The coaches chose Roosevelt's toughest player, who was one of the guys who came to recruit me, Michael Potter. I was first up on defense. Coach called Michael Potter's name. I drop into a three-point stance. Potter sets in front of me, and we're eye to eye between the dummies. Football is a funny game. Before the ball snaps, it's still and it's quiet. The ball snaps, we explode into each other. I rip my forearm into Michael's chest. I start driving. I use the hit to use my leg drive. I shed Mike. I hit the ball carrier, drive my shoulders through him, knocking him backwards to the ground. I had whipped Michael Potter, Roosevelt's toughest player. We went 5 times heads up that day. I won 2, Mike won 2, and 1 was a draw. At the end of two-a-days, I had taken the starting defensive end and tight end spot at Roosevelt. My sophomore year, I played well. My junior and senior years, I was voted by the Gary Post-Tribune All Northwest Conference defensive end. We go on through the season, and from my basketball play and football play at Roosevelt, it brought many college recruiters, phone calls, and letters. I was starting to get recruited by Division I schools. Only 6% of all high school players, football players, get a chance to go to a Division I school. I had 8 Division I schools wanting me to play football. I signed a letter of intent to go to Purdue University, but my first year freshman orientation was an eye-opener to me. Out of 35 freshman scholarship football players, 6 were black. And Coach Samuels had all of the football players stand up by groups. He got to the defensive ends and said, Blane, got to the defensive ends and he said, "Defensive ends, stand up." I was always taught to sit in the front row. I heard chairs rattling behind me. I turned and looked back. It was 12 white guys standing up. I said, "Wow." And Coach said, "Blane, aren't you a defensive end?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Purdue said I was the only one you wanted." Everybody exploded laughing. I guess everyone had heard that lie. We go through two-a-days, and I ended up being the number 1 JV defensive end. We've got our first game at Northwestern and in Evanston, Illinois. I detect that it's going to be a problem because one of the defensive end's older brother was the JV defensive end coach. So I went to the head coach, the defensive end varsity coach, and the JV coach, and I wanted to know the player rotation before we went to Northwestern. I was told that I would start the first and the third quarter. I was okay with that. Monday morning, we go to Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. Game time, 12 o'clock. Before the game, I was pulled from the starting lineup. I was okay with that. I said, boy, I'm going to play the second and fourth quarter. Anybody make a mistake, I'll correct it, and I'll finish the game strong. Second quarter come, I'm still on the bench. I'm starting to get a little pissed. At halftime, coach is yelling at all of the defensive ends and his brother for poor play. I sit back and I'm starting to rock because when I get mad, I start rocking and my anger is off the charts. But I said, I'm going to wait to see if I start the third quarter. He called his brother's name to start the third quarter, and I exploded. You no good motherfuckers. Y'all lied to me. You lying son of a bitches. You're treating me like shit. I must have went through this for about a minute, and all of the coaches huddled up. They said, had one black JV coach. The white coaches went to him and said, what do we do with Blane? Coach Wynn said, put his ass in the game. And if he fucks up, drop his ass off in Gary. Coach said, Blane Smith. I levitated to him like a Spike Lee movie. He said, you're in the game. I don't remember my feet touching the ground as I ran onto the field. Northwestern was stupid enough to run the two-back lead quarterback option at me. I destroyed the two lead backs. I hit the quarterback helmet to helmet. Ball flies into the air. Purdue recovers it. It's Purdue's ball. We run off the field, and I'm being congratulated by my teammates. I made 13 tackles that day, 4 in Northwestern's backfield, and we won. It was an interesting scenario because none of the players, none of the coaches ever talked to me about that incident. But my dad had told me, be prepared because you will be tested. And I would not allow Purdue to mistreat me anymore. By the 8th game of the season, I'm on varsity and we're traveling to Minnesota to play on television. I get in the game, I play well. I play in the next 4 games and letter as a freshman. As a sophomore, I was the 3rd defensive end. If any of the guys messed up, I was next into the game. I played in all 11 games, and I lettered as a sophomore. But my junior and senior years were my best. In 1975 and 1976, I was voted All Big Ten. In 1976, my teammates voted me captain of the defense. My junior and senior years were my best, though. I played in every game, and I got the recognition. The All Big Ten, the Leonard's All-American trophies. I played in the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. I played in the North-South Shrine game in Pontiac, Michigan. I had done all the things that I said when I was a 5th grader. Only 1% of all football players get a chance to play in the NFL. I graduated from Purdue in 1977, May. But in April, the NFL draft, I was drafted in the 7th round to the Cleveland Brown, James Brown team that I first saw in 1963. I had became the kind of football player that was welcome on any field, at any time, in any game. But the best thing about it was my journey and my trip. I loved football. I loved the violence in football. It was the only place where you could hit somebody as hard as you wanted and not go to jail. My trip through football taught me to never be late, to be dedicated, to be determined, to stick to whatever you said you were going to do, to cherish every moment, to love the teamwork, to love the camaraderie. Thank you.
Blane Smith.